The crowded marketplace of Nexus Station buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy conducted their business. Merchants hawked exotic wares while diplomats negotiated trade agreements in hushed tones. The massive space station served as neutral ground, a place where species could interact without the baggage of their homeworld conflicts. Captain Marcus Ghost Thompson moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his weathered face scanning the environment out of habit. 20 years in the SAS had made situational awareness second nature. He wore simple civilian clothes, nothing to indicate his military background, just another human trader visiting the station. His mission was purely diplomatic, delivering sealed communications from Earth's Defense Council to the Terran Embassy. The first sign of trouble came when conversations around him began to die down. Marcus felt the familiar prickle on the back of his neck that had kept him alive through countless operations. A path was clearing through the crowd, beings stepping aside with obvious fear and deference. Then he saw them. A squad of Vorthak soldiers in their distinctive crimson armor, each standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms. Their reptilian faces bore the typical expressions of superiority that had made the Vorthak Empire feared across 3 sectors. They moved with the arrogance of a species that had conquered 47 worlds in the last century. The squad leader, a massive warrior with ritual scars covering his scaled face, pointed directly at Marcus. "Human," the alien growled in heavily accented galactic standard. "You will move from our path." Marcus glanced around, noting the wide berth other species were giving the soldiers. Protocol dictated he should simply step aside. Earth maintained careful neutrality with the Vorthak Empire, despite their reputation for brutality. Starting an incident would create diplomatic complications, but something in the aliens' tone, the casual assumption that humans were beneath notice, triggered memories Marcus had tried to leave behind. He remembered the reports from the outer colonies, the families displaced by Vorthak expansion, the way other species looked at humans with pity rather than respect. "I'm not blocking anything," Marcus replied calmly, continuing his measured pace through the marketplace. "Plenty of room for everyone." The Vorthak squad leader's yellow eyes narrowed. In their culture, direct defiance from what they considered a lesser species was unthinkable. The soldier's 4 hands moved to his weapons, but station security regulations prevented him from drawing them in the civilian sectors. Instead, he chose a different approach. With a speed that surprised even Marcus, the alien's primary arm lashed out, striking the human across the chest with enough force to send him stumbling backward into a merchant's stall. The marketplace fell completely silent. Every eye turned to witness what many assumed would be a human's humiliation or worse. The Vorthak were known for their casual violence towards species they deemed inferior, and humans ranked low on their hierarchy of respect. Marcus pulled himself upright, dusting off his jacket. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth where he'd bitten his tongue. The smart play would be to apologize, back down, avoid escalation. That's what diplomats would recommend. But Marcus Thompson wasn't a diplomat. He was SAS, and 20 years of training had taught him that sometimes you had to stand your ground. Regardless of the odds, that was a mistake, he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. The Vorthak squad leader threw back his head and laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the marketplace. His soldiers joined in, clearly enjoying what they saw as a pathetic display of bravado from an inferior being. "Mistake?" the leader repeated, stepping closer to loom over Marcus. "The only mistake was made by your parents when they spawned such worthless offspring. Perhaps I should complete what natural selection failed to accomplish." The crowd pressed back further, expecting violence. Some beings activated recording devices, sensing they were about to witness something significant. The Vorthak had publicly humiliated representatives of other species before, but never with such deliberate cruelty. Marcus studied his opponent with the analytical mind of a professional soldier. The Vorthak was bigger, stronger, had 4 arms instead of 2, and was backed by a full squad. In any conventional assessment, the human didn't stand a chance. But Marcus had spent his career in situations where conventional wisdom said he was outmatched. The SAS had taught him that size and numbers meant nothing without proper application. He'd survived operations behind enemy lines where he'd been outnumbered 100 to 1. This was just another Tuesday, scaled up to an interstellar level. "You really want to do this here?" Marcus asked. gesturing to the hundreds of witnesses surrounding them. In front of all these people, the Vorthak's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. Yes, human. Let them see what happens when lesser species forget their place. Let them understand why the Vorthak Empire spans 50 systems while Earth huddles around a single star. Marcus nodded slowly, as if accepting the inevitable. He appeared to relax, shoulders dropping slightly in apparent defeat. The Vorthak leader smiled wider, savoring what he believed was victory before the fight even began. Then Marcus moved. Years of SAS training compressed into a single explosive moment. His right hand snapped up, striking the alien's throat just below the armor line where scales met softer tissue. Simultaneously, he pivoted left, using the Vorthak's forward momentum against him while driving his knee into what he hoped was a vulnerable joint. The massive alien staggered, clearly stunned that a human had not only struck back but done so effectively. The crowd erupted in shocked gasps and excited chatter. Many had never seen a human fight before, let alone successfully engage a Vorthak warrior. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. One successful strike didn't end a fight against an opponent with 4 arms and backup. The real battle was just starting, and the consequences would ripple far beyond this marketplace encounter. As station security alarms began to wail and the other Vorthak soldiers moved to surround him, Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Sometimes the right thing to do was also the stupidest thing to do. Today felt like one of those days. The Vorthak squad leader roared in fury, all 4 arms swinging toward Marcus in a coordinated assault designed to pummel the human into submission. But Marcus was no longer where the alien expected him to be. 20 years of close-quarters combat had taught Marcus that staying stationary meant death. He flowed between the massive arms like water, each movement calculated to avoid the crushing blows while positioning himself for counterattacks. The SAS had drilled spatial awareness into him until it became instinctive. Always know your exits, your weapons, your enemy's blind spots. The marketplace provided plenty of improvised weapons for someone trained to recognize them. A metal serving tray became a shield and striking surface. Support cables offered opportunities for leverage and misdirection. Even the uneven flooring could be used to disrupt an opponent's balance. The watching crowd had grown larger as word spread through the station. Beings pressed against viewing ports and emergency barriers, recording everything. Many had never seen effective human combat techniques, having only heard stories of Earth's military reputation. Marcus ducked under another swing and drove his elbow into the nerve cluster he'd identified near the Vorthak's secondary shoulder. The alien's left arms went briefly numb, evening the odds slightly, but the other 3 soldiers were moving to flank him, and Marcus knew he couldn't handle all 4 simultaneously. "Stand down, human," one of the flanking soldiers called out. "Submit now and we will make your death quick." Instead of responding, Marcus grabbed a support cable and used it to swing himself up onto a merchant platform, gaining height advantage and forcing the aliens to approach from predictable angles. The platform groaned under the combined weight as 2 Vorthak soldiers climbed up after him. The leader, still nursing his injured arms, gestured for his troops to spread out. "Surround the platform. The human thinks height will save him, but he has only delayed his defeat." Marcus assessed his situation with practiced calm. 4 hostiles, limited space, no backup, hundreds of witnesses, and station security undoubtedly en route. In training scenarios, this would be classified as a no-win situation. The instructors would use it to teach cadets about when to surrender. But something the instructors never factored into their scenarios was the psychological element. This wasn't just about one human fighting 4 aliens. Every being watching would carry this story home to their worlds. They would tell others how Earth's representatives responded to aggression, how humans fought when cornered. Marcus had served in enough diplomatic security details to understand the importance of perception. Sometimes a single action could define how an entire species was viewed for generations. Earth was still considered a minor player in galactic politics, largely because humans were seen as cautious, reasonable, diplomatic. Today, he was going to change that perception. The first Vorthak to reach the platform lunged forward with all 4 arms extended, clearly intending to grapple Marcus into submission. Instead of retreating, Marcus stepped into the attack, catching one arm and using the alien's momentum to flip him over the platform edge. The massive soldier crashed into a food stall below, sending exotic fruits flying in all directions. The crowd's excitement was becoming audible now, cheers and gasps mixing with the sound of combat. Many beings were actively cheering for Marcus, apparently enjoying seeing the notoriously arrogant Vorthak forces challenged. The second soldier on the platform was more cautious, approaching with his weapons drawn despite regulations. Station security would find the Vorthak Empire later, but right now survival trumped diplomatic protocol. Marcus spotted the weapon, an energy blade that could cut through most armor. Deadly in close quarters but requiring precise control, the alien held it in his primary right hand while his other three arms prepared to grab or strike. "You fight well for an inferior species," the soldier admitted, "but energy blades end all resistance." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the fight began, he looked completely relaxed. Energy blades are for amateurs who don't understand real combat. Before the Vorthak could respond, Marcus had closed the distance. His left hand locked around the alien's weapon arm, while his right found the pressure point that would force the fingers to open. The blade clattered to the platform as Marcus drove his knee up into the soldier's midsection, then used a hip throw to send him tumbling after his comrade. The squad leader was climbing onto the platform now. His injured arms apparently recovered enough for combat. His face showed the ritual scars of a warrior who had survived dozens of battles, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a professional killer. "Enough games, human. You have embarrassed my soldiers, but I am not so easily defeated. I have killed your kind before." Marcus wiped blood from his split lip and settled into a combat stance that would have been familiar to any SAS instructor. "Then you know we don't stay down easy." The alien's attack was different from his soldiers, more controlled, more professional. All four arms moved in sequence rather than wild swings, creating a rhythm that was harder to predict and counter. This Vorthak had clearly studied human anatomy and fighting techniques, but Marcus had advantages the alien couldn't account for. His training included scenarios against multiple opponents, environmental awareness, and psychological warfare. More importantly, he'd spent years learning to turn his opponent's strengths against them. The Vorthak's superior reach became a liability when Marcus got inside his guard. The four arms that should have been an advantage became a coordination problem in tight quarters. The alien's confidence became arrogance, leading to overcommitment on attacks. When the squad leader finally fell, struck unconscious by a precisely applied blood choke, the marketplace erupted in cheers from dozens of species. Marcus stood on the platform breathing heavily, surrounded by four defeated Vorthak warriors. Station security arrived to find an impossible scene. One human standing victorious over an entire squad of the galaxy's most feared soldiers. The implications of what they were witnessing would ripple through diplomatic channels for months to come. But Marcus was already thinking beyond this moment. He'd just publicly humiliated the Vorthak Empire's military forces. There would be consequences, and they would extend far beyond his personal safety. As security officers moved to separate the combatants and take statements, Marcus caught sight of the recording devices still focused on him. Every major news network in the galaxy would have this footage within hours. Earth was about to discover that their quiet diplomatic approach was no longer an option. The Vorthak Empire would demand satisfaction, and when they came looking for it, they would bring more than 4 soldiers. Marcus allowed himself to be escorted away for medical treatment and questioning, but his mind was already racing ahead to the implications. He'd won this battle decisively, but wars were another matter entirely. The real fight was just beginning. Within 6 hours, footage of the fight had spread across every major communication network in known space. The recording showed the same impossible scene from dozens of angles. One human soldier methodically defeating 4 Vorthak warriors in hand-to-hand combat. On the Terran news networks, the story led every broadcast. Earth soldier defeats Vorthak squad in station marketplace scrolled across screens while military analysts tried to explain what viewers had just witnessed. Most humans had never seen their species' military capabilities demonstrated so dramatically. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in Earth Defense Command's Situation Room, watching the footage for the 5th time. Around the holographic display, her senior staff wore expressions ranging from pride to absolute terror at the implications. "How long before we hear from the Vorthak?" asked General Rodriguez, commander of Earth's ground forces. "We already have," Admiral Chen replied, gesturing to the communication console. 3 separate messages in the last hour. The first was a formal complaint through diplomatic channels. The second was a demand for the immediate extradition of Captain Thompson. The third was considerably less diplomatic. She activated the holographic display, revealing a Vorthak admiral whose scarred face filled the viewing space. When he spoke, his voice carried the measured tone of barely controlled rage. "People of Earth," the alien said, "you harbor a criminal who has assaulted warriors of the Vorthak Empire. This aggression cannot stand unanswered. You have 72 hours to surrender this individual for proper justice. Failure to comply will result in appropriate military response." General Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Military response? They're talking about attacking Earth over a bar fight. It wasn't a bar fight, corrected Colonel Williams, head of intelligence. It was a public humiliation of their military forces, broadcast across the galaxy. In Vorthak culture, that's closer to a declaration of war than a simple assault. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing Vorthak fleet positions. "What's our current assessment of their military capabilities?" "Substantial," Colonel Williams replied grimly. 57 dreadnoughts, over 300 cruisers, and enough support vessels to blockade our entire system. Their technology is roughly equivalent to ours, but they have significant numerical superiority. And our diplomatic options? Limited. The Vorthak operate on strength-based hierarchy. They respect only power, and they've spent decades viewing humanity as weak because we prefer negotiation to confrontation. Admiral Chen turned to the communication officer. "Any word from our other allies?" "Mixed responses, ma'am. The Centauri Federation is offering to mediate. The Arcturus Alliance is maintaining strict neutrality. Most of the minor powers are staying silent, probably waiting to see which way this goes." She wasn't surprised. Earth had spent decades building diplomatic relationships based on mutual benefit and peaceful cooperation. But when threatened with military action, many of those relationships proved less reliable than hoped. On the news feeds, reactions from across the galaxy were pouring in. Some species expressed support for Earth's right to defend its citizens. Others called for calm and diplomatic resolution. But increasingly, the coverage was focusing on something else entirely. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Park from the intelligence station, "you need to see this." The display switched to a feed from the Antaran News Network, where a panel of military experts was analyzing the fight footage. "What we witnessed was not luck or desperation," one analyst was saying. "This human demonstrated systematic military training of the highest caliber. Every movement was precise, calculated, professional. This suggests Earth's military capabilities may be significantly underestimated." Another panelist nodded agreement. "The Vorthak have been expanding unchallenged for decades because species either submit to their demands or suffer conquest." But this human showed no fear, no hesitation. He fought like someone who expected to win. Admiral Chen muted the feed and turned to her staff. "That's the real issue here. For years, everyone has seen us as the cautious diplomats, the species that talks instead of fighting. Captain Thompson just shattered that perception in the most public way possible." "Is that good or bad?" asked General Rodriguez. "Both," Colonel Williams answered. "Good because it might make aggressive species think twice about pushing us around. Bad because it means we can't hide behind our reputation for peaceful solutions anymore. Every major power is going to want to test us now." The Admiral pulled up Earth's defensive positions on the holographic display. Sol system had been fortified over the past century, but the defenses were designed more for deterrence than actual warfare. If the Vorthak decided to attack in force, Earth would face its first major interstellar conflict. "What about Captain Thompson himself?" she asked. "Where is he now?" "Still on Nexus Station in protective custody," replied the intelligence officer. "Station security is holding him pending resolution of the diplomatic situation. The Vorthak are demanding immediate extradition, but station administrators are stalling. Smart of them. The moment Thompson sets foot on Vorthak territory, he's dead. They'll want to make an example of him." Admiral Chen studied the timeline displayed on her console. 65 hours remaining until the Vorthak ultimatum expired. Earth's fleet was already mobilizing, but their numerical disadvantage was significant. If this escalated to open warfare, the outcome was far from certain. But there was another element to consider. The footage of the fight was still spreading, and public reaction was evolving in unexpected ways. Humans across Earth and the colonies were expressing pride in Thompson's actions. For the first time in decades, people were talking about standing up to galactic bullies rather than accommodating them. More importantly, other species were beginning to reassess their relationships with both Earth and the Vorthak Empire. If humanity could produce soldiers capable of defeating Vorthak warriors in single combat, what were their larger military capabilities? Admiral, Lieutenant Park called out again. Incoming priority message from the Centauri Federation. The holographic display activated, revealing Ambassador Veltar, the senior Centauri diplomat. His 4 eyes showed the stress patterns that indicated high anxiety. Admiral Chen, he said without preamble, the Federation wishes to offer sanctuary to Captain Thompson. We can arrange discreet transportation away from Nexus Station before the Vorthak deadline. It was a generous offer, but Admiral Chen recognized the political calculation behind it. The Centauri wanted to align themselves with what might be emerging as a new power balance. Thank you, Ambassador, but Earth doesn't abandon its people. Captain Thompson acted in self-defense against unprovoked aggression. We will not hand him over to his attackers. The Centauri's eye patterns shifted to what humans had learned indicated surprise. Admiral, with respect, the Vorthak fleet is already mobilizing. This could mean war. Then war it is, Admiral Chen replied calmly. But it won't be the kind of war the Vorthak are expecting. After ending the communication, she turned to her senior staff. The room had fallen silent, everyone understanding the magnitude of what had just been decided. General Rodriguez, mobilize all ground forces and begin defensive preparations. Colonel Williams, I want complete intelligence assessments on Vorthak fleet movements and capabilities. And someone get Captain Thompson on a secure channel. If we're going to fight a war over his actions, he deserves to know what's coming. As her staff hurried to execute orders, Admiral Chen remained focused on the tactical displays. One human soldier had just changed the course of galactic politics through sheer determination and superior training. Now it was time to see if the rest of humanity was ready to back him up. War Admiral Keith Var stood on the command bridge of the Vorthak dreadnought Blood of Conquest, watching his fleet assemble in the void beyond Nexus Station. 63 vessels of war, each one a testament to the Empire's military supremacy, formed battle lines that had conquered worlds and broken the will of entire species. The holographic display showed tactical formations stretching across millions of cubic kilometers. Dreadnoughts formed the core, their massive hulls bristling with plasma cannons and torpedo tubes. Cruisers and destroyers filled supporting positions while fighter squadrons ran patrol patterns on the fleet's perimeter. It was overwhelming force by any reasonable standard, more than sufficient to reduce Earth's defenses to glowing debris, yet Kethvar found himself troubled by details that should have been irrelevant. Report on the human soldier, he commanded, his 4 arms operating different control interfaces simultaneously. Sub-Admiral Gorthak activated the intelligence display, showing footage from the marketplace incident. Marcus Thompson, age 42, career military service with an organization called the Special Air Service. Extensive combat experience in what humans term unconventional warfare. Kethvar studied the footage again, analyzing each movement with the eye of a professional warrior. What he saw contradicted everything the Empire's intelligence services had reported about human military capabilities. This fighting technique. Our analysts have seen nothing like it in previous encounters with human forces, confirmed War Admiral. Our database contains records from dozens of species, but these combat methods are unique. Precise targeting of anatomical weak points, exploitation of momentum and leverage, use of environmental elements as weapons. The War Admiral's scarred face twisted into what might have been concern. And our warriors? How do they explain their defeat? Sub-Admiral Gorthak hesitated before responding. Squad leader Vextar claims the human fought with inhuman speed and strength. He insists their opponent must have been enhanced with combat drugs or cybernetic implants. Medical scans? Clean. Standard human physiology with no artificial enhancements detected. Kethavar dismissed the display and moved to the tactical station. Intelligence failures could be corrected later. Right now he had a war to plan. Status of Earth's defenses. 47 major vessels, approximately 200 support craft. Orbital defense platforms around their homeworld and primary colonies. Their technology appears equivalent to our own, but numerical inferiority is significant. Ground forces? Unknown. Earth's military maintains strict operational security. Our intelligence estimates suggest standard numbers for a single system species, but recent events indicate we may have underestimated their capabilities. The War Admiral studied the tactical projections. A straightforward assault would succeed through numerical superiority, but casualties would be higher than anticipated if human forces proved more capable than expected. War Admiral, interrupted the communications officer. Priority message from High Command. The main display activated, revealing the massive form of Supreme War Admiral Thexacor, commander of all Vorthak military forces. His presence indicated this situation had reached the highest levels of Imperial attention. Kethvar, the Supreme War Admiral's voice carried the authority of absolute command. The Council of War has reviewed the marketplace incident. This cannot stand unanswered. Understood, Supreme War Admiral. My fleet is prepared for immediate assault on Earth's positions. The Council desires more than military victory. This human has publicly demonstrated that Vorthak warriors can be defeated. Other species are taking notice. We must make an example that will be remembered for generations. Kethavar's neck frill expanded slightly, indicating heightened attention. What are your orders? Total conquest of Earth system. Occupation of their homeworld. The human soldier will be captured alive and brought before the Council for public execution, but more importantly, their entire species must understand the consequences of defying our empire. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar to contemplate the magnitude of his assigned task. Total conquest meant destroying Earth's military completely, while keeping their infrastructure intact for subsequent occupation. It required precision rather than simple, overwhelming force. Sub-Admiral Gorthak, begin detailed planning for system invasion. I want complete tactical assessments of every Earth military installation. As his staff began implementing orders, Kethvar found his attention drawn back to the footage of Thompson's fight. Something about the human's methodology bothered him, though he couldn't identify exactly what. The warrior's movements had been efficient rather than desperate. He'd shown no signs of panic or fear despite being outnumbered 4-1. Most disturbing, he'd appeared to expect victory from the beginning as if the outcome had never been in doubt. In decades of conquest, Kethvar had learned to read the psychology of his enemies. Species that submitted quickly showed characteristic patterns: fear, desperation, last-minute bargaining attempts. Species that fought to the end showed different patterns: defiance, rage, desperate courage. But Thompson had displayed something else entirely. Calm professional competence, as if defeating Vorthak warriors was simply another job requirement. That suggested a level of military confidence that didn't match intelligence reports about human capabilities. War Admiral, called the sensor officer, detecting new ships entering the system. The tactical display updated, showing additional vessels appearing from hyperspace, not Earth ships. These hull configurations belong to species throughout the local sector. Identification: Centauri Federation cruisers, Arcturus Alliance destroyers, even some independent vessels from the rim worlds. They're not approaching in hostile formation, but they're definitely observing our fleet. Kethvar's frill expanded further. In all his campaigns, this was unprecedented. Other species typically avoided areas of Vorthak military operations, not wanting to risk accidental involvement in conflicts. Orders, War Admiral? Asked Sub-Admiral Gorthak. Kethvar studied the developing situation. The presence of neutral observers complicated the tactical picture significantly. Whatever happened here would be witnessed and reported across the galaxy. More troubling was what their presence implied. These species had sent warships to observe a conflict between the Vorthak Empire and what should have been a minor human settlement. That suggested they expected something worth watching. Continue fleet preparations, but delay final assault orders until we have complete intelligence on Earth's defensive capabilities. I want to understand exactly what we're facing before committing to battle. War Admiral, High Command expects swift action. High Command expects victory, Kethvar corrected. I intend to deliver that victory, but not at the cost of unnecessary casualties due to poor intelligence. As his staff hurried to implement new orders, the War Admiral continued studying the tactical displays. Every instinct developed through decades of successful conquest was warning him that this situation contained elements he didn't fully understand. One human soldier had defeated 4 Vorthak warriors through superior training and technique. If Earth could produce such soldiers in significant numbers, this campaign might prove more challenging than anyone anticipated. But the Empire had committed to war, and Vorthak honor demanded satisfaction for the public humiliation their forces had suffered. Whatever Earth's true capabilities, They would be tested in the crucible of battle. Kethvar allowed himself a predatory smile. He had spent his career conquering overconfident enemies. If humans wanted to fight the Vorthak Empire, they would discover why 47 worlds had submitted rather than face total destruction. The only question was whether they would learn that lesson before or after their civilization was reduced to ash. Admiral Chen stood in the primary command center of Luna Defense Station, watching her fleet take positions throughout the Sol system. The holographic display showed every ship, every defensive platform, every weapon installation that stood between Earth and the approaching Vorthak Armada. On paper, the numbers were discouraging. Earth's forces were outnumbered nearly 3-1, facing an enemy with a reputation for crushing military superiority. But Admiral Chen had access to information that wouldn't appear on any tactical assessment the Vorthak possessed. Status report on Project Prometheus, she commanded. Colonel Martinez, head of Special Operations Command, activated a classified display. All units are in position and ready for deployment. The Vorthak have no intelligence on our capabilities in this area. The display showed deployment patterns that would have confused any conventional military analyst. Instead of standard fleet formations, Earth's forces were distributed in seemingly random patterns throughout the system. Small units operated independently, avoiding the massive formations that typically characterize space warfare. Estimated time to enemy contact? 18 hours at current approach speed, reported the tactical officer. The Vorthak fleet is advancing in standard conquest formation. Maximum firepower concentration with supporting elements. Admiral Chen nodded. Standard Vorthak tactics relied on overwhelming force applied to key strategic points. They would attempt to destroy Earth's primary fleet elements, then systematically reduce planetary defenses until surrender became inevitable. It was an approach that had succeeded 47 times before against other species. Today they would discover why Earth had remained confident despite their numerical disadvantage. Admiral, interrupted the communications officer. Incoming message from Captain Thompson. The display activated, showing Marcus Thompson in the medical bay of Nexus Station. His face bore the marks of his recent fight, but his expression remained calm and professional. Admiral Chen, he said without preamble, I've been monitoring the situation. If my actions have caused this escalation, I take full responsibility. Captain, your actions revealed a situation that already existed, Admiral Chen replied. The Vorthak have been planning expansion toward Sol system for months. They were simply waiting for an excuse. What are my orders, ma'am? Admiral Chen considered her response carefully. You've done enough, Captain. Station security can protect you until this situation resolves. Marcus shook his head. With respect, Admiral, my fight started this. I'd like to be present when it finishes. Before Admiral Chen could respond, another voice entered the conversation. General Rodriguez appeared on a secondary display from Earth Defense Command. Admiral, we're receiving volunteer applications faster than we can process them. Word of Thompson's fight has spread through every military base and training facility on Earth. Personnel are requesting immediate transfer to combat units. Numbers? Over 50,000 applications in the last 6 hours. Everyone wants to serve in the units that will face the Vorthak directly. Admiral Chen wasn't surprised. The footage of Thompson's victory had spread throughout Earth's military with predictable results. For decades, human forces had trained for conflicts that never materialized while watching other species submit to Vorthak demands. Now they had proof that superior training and determination could overcome apparently impossible odds. Every soldier, sailor, and marine wanted the chance to test themselves against the galaxy's most feared military force. General, implement accelerated deployment protocols. I want every qualified volunteer in combat positions within 12 hours. Already in progress, Admiral, but there's something else you need to see. The display switched to a news feed from Earth Global Network. The anchor was interviewing Dr. Sarah Kim, a military historian specializing in human warfare evolution. Professor Kim, the anchor was asking, can you explain how Captain Thompson achieved what many consider impossible? What people don't understand, Dr. Kim replied, is that human military doctrine has evolved specifically for asymmetric warfare. Our entire approach is designed around defeating numerically superior enemies through superior tactics, training, and technology. But surely the Vorthak have similar capabilities. The Vorthak have conquered through overwhelming force applied systematically. They've never faced an enemy that specializes in unconventional warfare. That treats numerical disadvantage as a tactical opportunity rather than an insurmountable problem. Admiral Chen muted the feed and turned to Colonel Martinez. Professor Kim is sharing classified doctrine on open networks. Actually, ma'am, she's been cleared to provide general information. Public affairs determined that psychological warfare is now a legitimate tactical consideration. The Admiral understood immediately. If the Vorthak were monitoring Earth communications, and they certainly were, they were now receiving information designed to create uncertainty about human military capabilities. Admiral, called the sensor officer, detecting movement from the Vorthak fleet. They're adjusting formation. The tactical display updated, showing the enemy armada shifting from standard approach formation to something more cautious. Instead of the concentrated spearhead typically used for overwhelming assault, they were spreading into broader lines with increased spacing between vessels. They're responding to intelligence reports, observed Colonel Martinez. Someone over there is smart enough to recognize that their initial assumptions might be wrong. Admiral Chen studied the enemy formation changes. War Admiral Kethvar was clearly an experienced commander who understood the value of adapting tactics based on new information. That made him more dangerous than an overconfident opponent, but also presented opportunities. Colonel, initiate Phase 1 of Prometheus. Let's see how they respond to actual contact with our forces. Throughout the Sol system, small units began moving toward predetermined positions. These weren't traditional fleet elements, but specialized teams trained for exactly this type of engagement. The first contact came at the system's edge, where a Vorthak patrol squadron encountered what appeared to be a damaged Earth cargo vessel requesting assistance. When they moved to investigate, they discovered that the cargo vessel was actually a heavily armed special operations platform. The engagement lasted less than 5 minutes. When it ended, 3 Vorthak destroyers had been eliminated with no Earth casualties. More importantly, the attacking platform had vanished before enemy reinforcements could respond. Vorthak fleet is reacting, reported the tactical officer. They're pulling their forward units back and increasing defensive formations. Admiral Chen allowed herself a slight smile. Phase 1 was designed to demonstrate that Earth forces could strike effectively at times and places of their choosing. The Vorthak were learning that this wouldn't be a conventional fleet engagement. Estimated impact on enemy morale? She asked. Unknown, but their communication traffic has increased significantly. They're requesting additional intelligence on Earth military capabilities. Intelligence they're not going to find, added Colonel Martinez. Project Prometheus has been compartmentalized for 15 years. Even our own people don't understand the full scope until deployment. The Admiral turned back to the communication with Captain Thompson. Captain, you asked about orders. How would you feel about leading a special operations team in the main engagement? Marcus Thompson's expression shifted to something that might have been anticipation. I'd consider it an honor, ma'am. Then get to Luna Base immediately. Colonel Martinez will brief you on your actual mission parameters. As the communication ended, Admiral Chen focused on the tactical displays showing both fleets maneuvering for advantage. The Vorthak still possessed numerical superiority, but they were no longer approaching with the confidence of certain victory. Captain Thompson's marketplace fight had accomplished something no diplomatic initiative could achieve. It had forced the galaxy to reconsider their assumptions about human military capabilities. Now it was time to show them exactly how much they had underestimated Earth's preparations for this day. War Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. His fleet had been engaged with Earth forces for 6 hours, and nothing was proceeding according to standard conquest protocols. The humans weren't fighting like any species he had encountered in decades of warfare. Instead of massing their fleet for decisive battle, they had scattered into dozens of small units that struck without warning, then vanished before his forces could respond effectively. Damage report, he commanded, though the numbers were already displayed across his console. 11 vessels destroyed, 23 damaged, Sub-Admiral Gorthak replied. Enemy losses are minimal. Define minimal. 3 confirmed kills, possibly 2 more. Their forces appear to prioritize escape over engagement. We cannot force decisive battle. Kethavar's neck frill flattened against his skull, indicating extreme displeasure. The Vorthak Empire had conquered 47 worlds through superior firepower applied systematically. Enemy fleets met them in honorable battle and were destroyed through overwhelming force. But Earth's forces refused to engage according to established principles of warfare. They struck at supply convoys, isolated patrol squadrons, and communication relays. Each attack was precisely planned and perfectly executed, but none offered the opportunity for decisive retaliation. "War Admiral," interrupted the sensor officer, detecting massive energy signatures from Earth orbit. The tactical display shifted, revealing something that made Kethvar's 4 hearts skip beats simultaneously. Earth's planetary defense grid was powering up, but the energy readings were far beyond anything in his intelligence reports. "Impossible," Sub-Admiral Gorthak breathed. "Those are Dreadnought-class power signatures from fixed installations." Before Kethvar could respond, space around his fleet erupted in coherent energy beams. The attacks came from directions that should have been empty space, striking with precision that suggested targeting systems of unprecedented accuracy. The Dreadnought Endless Victory took a direct hit to its primary reactor complex. The massive vessel simply ceased to exist, converted to expanding plasma in the space of heartbeats. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethvar commanded, but his fleet was already scattering. The energy beams continued firing, each shot perfectly calibrated to penetrate Vorthak armor at maximum range. "War Admiral, we're detecting cloaked platforms throughout the system. Estimate 50 to 60 firing positions." Kethvar felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest: genuine fear. Earth hadn't just hidden their fleet strength. They had constructed an entirely covert defensive network capable of engaging a full invasion force. "How did our intelligence fail so completely?" "Unknown, War Admiral. These installations show no previous energy signatures. They must have been powered down during all previous reconnaissance." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Earth's hidden weapons were methodically destroying Vorthak vessels, while their mobile forces continued precision strikes against anything that attempted to regroup. "War Admiral," called the communications officer, receiving transmission from Earth Defense Command. The main display activated, revealing Admiral Chen on the bridge of her command vessel. Her expression showed the calm confidence of someone holding all the advantages. "War Admiral Kethvar," she said without preamble, "I'm offering you one opportunity to withdraw your forces from Sol system. Earth Commander, you have delayed your inevitable defeat. Our forces remain superior." Admiral Chen's slight smile was somehow more unnerving than open threats. "War Admiral, you currently have 41 operational vessels remaining. My forces have eliminated 16 of your ships while taking minimal casualties. At current rates, your fleet will cease to exist within 4 hours. Kethvar checked his tactical displays, confirming numbers he didn't want to believe. Earth's assessment was mathematically accurate. "But," Admiral Chen continued, "I'm not interested in unnecessary destruction. Withdraw now, and your surviving forces can return to Vorthak space with a message for your empire." "What message?" "That humanity is no longer accepting Vorthak aggression." Captain Thompson defended himself against unprovoked assault. Earth will defend its citizens against unprovoked warfare. Future attacks will be met with increasingly severe responses. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar to contemplate options that had suddenly become very limited. His entire career had been built on the assumption of Vorthak military superiority. Today, that assumption was being systematically destroyed. "War Admiral," Sub-Admiral Gorthak said quietly, "recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve remaining forces. The Empire does not retreat. The Empire also does not waste fleets uselessly. Earth has demonstrated capabilities we cannot match with current force levels." Kethvar studied the tactical situation one more time. 3 more of his vessels had been eliminated while he considered his options. Earth's forces were clearly capable of destroying his entire fleet if they chose to press their advantage, but retreat would mean admitting that a single system species had defeated the most feared military force in known space. The political implications would ripple through the Empire for generations. "War Admiral," the communications officer called urgently. "Priority transmission from High Command." Supreme War Admiral Thexkor appeared on the display, his massive form radiating barely controlled fury. "Kethvar, explain this disaster." "Supreme War Admiral, Earth's military capabilities were grossly underestimated. They possess advanced defensive systems and tactical doctrines we have not previously encountered. Are you requesting reinforcements?" Kethvar considered his response carefully. Reinforcements would mean admitting failure, but they might also mean salvaging victory from an impossible situation. Supreme War Admiral, Earth's forces are more capable than any previous conquest target. Additional fleet elements would be advisable. Request denied. You have sufficient forces for conquest of a single system. Complete your mission or face consequences for failure. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar with impossible orders and dwindling options. High Command clearly didn't understand the tactical reality his fleet was facing. War Admiral, called the sensor officer, detecting new contacts approaching our position. The tactical display updated, showing a single Earth vessel approaching the Vorthak fleet. It was broadcasting identification, signals for a diplomatic courier. They want to talk. Again, observed Sub-Admiral Gorthak, or they want to demonstrate their confidence by approaching our battle fleet with a single unarmed vessel. The courier ship transmitted a simple message. Captain Marcus Thompson requested permission to board the Vorthak flagship for direct negotiations. Kethvar stared at the request with something approaching disbelief. The human who had started this entire conflict was voluntarily placing himself within reach of Vorthak forces. It could be a trap, Sub-Admiral Gorthak warned. What trap could one human spring aboard a dreadnought with 4,000 warriors? But even as he said it, Kethvar remembered footage of that same human defeating 4 Vorthak soldiers in single combat. Underestimating human capabilities had already proven disastrous. Grant docking permission, he decided, but full security protocols. I want to see this remarkable human for myself. As the courier ship approached his flagship, Kethvar wondered if he was about to meet the individual who had single-handedly changed the balance of galactic power. The war was far from over, but its outcome was becoming increasingly clear. Marcus Thompson walked through the corridors of the Vorthak flagship, flanked by 12 heavily armed warriors. Their escort was clearly intended as intimidation. But Marcus had spent his career in situations where he was outnumbered and surrounded by enemies. The ship's interior reflected Vorthak culture, massive scales designed for beings 8 feet tall, with surfaces that emphasized strength over comfort. Everything was built to remind visitors of the Empire's physical superiority and military might. But Marcus noted other details that told a different story. The warriors escorting him showed signs of stress, tense postures, frequent glances at their weapons, excessive alertness for what should have been a simple prisoner transport. They were afraid of him. The realization was both satisfying and concerning. Fear could be a useful tool in negotiations, but it could also lead to desperate actions if not managed carefully. The escort brought him to a massive chamber dominated by a holographic display showing the current tactical situation. War Admiral Kethvar stood at the center, his forearms operating multiple control interfaces while studying fleet positions. When Marcus entered, every Vorthak in the room turned to stare. He recognized the expressions from his years in special operations, professional warriors evaluating a potential threat. Captain Marcus Thompson, War Admiral Kethvar said, his voice carrying the measured tone of controlled hostility. You are responsible for this conflict. I defended myself against unprovoked assault, Marcus replied calmly. Everything that followed was a choice made by your empire. Kethvar stepped closer, using his significant height advantage for psychological pressure. Your actions have cost the Empire 16 vessels and thousands of warriors. Your actions cost you those ships, Marcus corrected. Earth gave you every opportunity to withdraw. You chose escalation. The War Admiral's neck frill expanded, indicating rising anger. Several warriors in the chamber moved closer, hands shifting toward weapons. Marcus remained perfectly still, showing no reaction to the implied threats. 20 years of training had taught him that appearing calm under pressure was often more unnerving to opponents than displays of aggression. Human, Kethvar growled. You will explain Earth's military capabilities. Our intelligence was clearly inadequate. That's not how surrenders work, Marcus said quietly. Surrender? The War Admiral's four hearts began beating faster, causing visible color changes in his scales. You are aboard my flagship, surrounded by my warriors, facing the might of my fleet. Marcus gestured toward the tactical display. War Admiral, in the 6 hours since I've been aboard this ship, you've lost 4 more vessels. Your fleet now numbers 37 operational units facing a defensive network. that has barely begun demonstrating its capabilities. He stepped closer to the holographic display, pointing to specific fleet positions. Your formations are defensive rather than offensive. You're maintaining maximum spacing to minimize damage from Earth's directed energy weapons. Your patrol patterns show you're avoiding sectors where my people demonstrated the ability to strike without warning. HFY studied the tactical situation with growing unease. Everything the human said was accurate. More importantly, Marcus continued, you're receiving communications traffic that suggests your high command doesn't understand the situation you're facing. They expect conquest, but you know that's no longer possible with current force levels. Earth's forces cannot maintain this level of engagement indefinitely, can't they? Marcus smiled slightly. War Admiral, everything you've seen so far represents roughly 15% of Earth's actual defensive capabilities. We've been preparing for this conflict for decades. The chamber fell silent except for the background noise of ship systems. Every Vorthak present understood the implications of what they had just heard. Impossible, Sub-Admiral Gorthak said from his position near the tactical station. Our intelligence networks would have detected major military construction. Your intelligence networks detected what we wanted them to detect, Marcus replied. Earth has been building covert defensive systems throughout Sol system for the past 20 years. What you've encountered so far is the tip of a very large iceberg. War Admiral HFY studied the human with something approaching professional respect. Thompson's calm confidence suggested he was telling the truth about Earth's hidden capabilities. What do you propose? Complete withdrawal of Vorthak forces from Sol system. Formal acknowledgement that the marketplace incident was resolved through proportional response, and a new understanding between our species based on mutual respect, rather than assumed dominance. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. War Admiral, your Empire has spent decades conquering worlds because no one was prepared to stand up to your bullying. Earth is prepared. The question is whether you want to test our full capabilities or accept that the balance of power has shifted. Before HFY could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The tactical display updated, showing new Earth vessels appearing throughout the system. But these weren't the small agile units that had been harassing the Vorthak fleet. These were massive dreadnoughts, each one comparable in size to the largest Vorthak vessels. Cloaked dreadnoughts, Sub-Admiral Gorthak breathed. They've been hidden throughout the system. The display showed 43 Earth capital ships taking positions around the Vorthak fleet. Combined with the existing defensive platforms and mobile units, Earth now clearly held overwhelming tactical superiority. Admiral Chen thought you might need a more concrete demonstration, Marcus said, watching the War Admiral's expression. Those ships have been waiting in stealth mode for the past 8 hours. Their targeting systems currently have firing solutions on every vessel in your fleet. War Admiral HFY stared at the tactical display, finally understanding the full scope of his situation. Earth hadn't just repelled his attack. They had deliberately allowed him to commit his forces to a position where they could be destroyed at will. You could have eliminated our fleet. Immediately, Admiral, Chen prefers diplomacy to unnecessary destruction. But make no mistake, if you force Earth to defend itself, the response will be overwhelming. The War Admiral's frill flattened against his neck, indicating a combination of fear and grudging respect. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced an enemy with such complete tactical superiority who still chose to offer terms rather than simply attacking. What guarantee do I have that Earth will not pursue offensive action if we withdraw? You have my word, Marcus said simply. Earth has no interest in conquest or expansion. We want to be left alone to develop our civilization in peace. Respect that, and we'll have no conflicts. And if the Empire chooses to test Earth's defenses again? Marcus's smile became predatory. War Admiral, what you've seen today represents humanity operating under rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties and collateral damage. Future attacks will be met with responses that prioritize efficiency over restraint. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the chamber understood that Earth possessed the capability to destroy the Vorthak fleet completely, but was choosing not to exercise that option. War Admiral HFY studied the tactical display one more time, then made the only decision that would preserve what remained of his command. All units, begin withdrawal to hyperspace coordinates. Stand down from combat alert. As his fleet began moving away from Earth's positions, Kethavar turned back to Marcus Thompson. "Human, your species has proven more formidable than our intelligence suggested. The Empire will remember this lesson." "See that you do," Marcus replied. "And, War Admiral, the next time someone tells you that humans are weak, you might want to reconsider that assessment." 3 hours later, the last Vorthik vessel jumped to hyperspace, carrying news that would reshape galactic politics. Earth had revealed itself as a major military power, but one that preferred diplomacy to conquest. Marcus Thompson returned to find a galaxy that looked at humanity with new respect and considerable caution. His marketplace fight had started as self-defense, but ended as the first shot in a new era of interstellar relations. The age of human diplomacy backed by overwhelming force had begun.